Okay, so I did decide to review the Halloween movies. I put several polls out there, and 80% of you said, yes, we want you to revisit the Halloween movies. And speaking of Halloween movies, finding them all in one place is an issue, it seems. It might be because the movies might have changed, like different distribution companies, so they are not all under the same umbrella, so I'm guessing that's why they're in different places. But it'd be really cool if they were all in one place, but honestly, I should eventually invest in the whole box set. I did that with Nightmare on Elm Street, and I did that with Friday the 13th. I just don't have the Halloween box set. Probably because I really only rewatched the first three. I've watched those repeatedly over the years. 4 and 5, not so much, and I don't remember if I saw The Curse of Michael Myers, the 6th one. I remember the one with Busta Rhymes, and I remember the one with LL Cool J, but I forget which one came first. Because I saw those in a movie theater and then I never watched them again. So this is going to be an interesting week. Also, word to the wise, the copy that is on Shudder is not digitally remastered. It still has all the hits and the pops of old film, which actually didn't bother me. Come to think of it, it was kind of nostalgic because it was like if I had gone to see it at the drive-in or the movie theater when it first came out. I'm not going to go over this movie scene for scene. Instead, I'd rather dedicate this video to talking about what made this movie so special. Even though this movie's 40 years old, just on the off chance that there is someone younger viewing this video, I would never want to spoil that experience for them. And speaking to my younger viewers, hi, how are you? I really, really encourage you to watch the original Halloween 1978 at nighttime with the lights off and the sound turned all the way up. Well, not all the way up, because your neighbors might hear screaming and stabbing noises and call the police, but loud enough that it's impactful. I actually think about stuff like that because the neighborhood that I live in, my sister just recently said that it's similar to the neighborhood from Poltergeist, and how the houses are very similar to each other and that they're kind of close together. So one time I was watching a horror movie and I had it on surround sound and there was a lot of screaming and gunshots. It might have been Don't Breathe. And I thought to myself, if somebody was walking by the house right now and they could hear the surround sound from outside, they might actually call the police by the way this movie sounds. I'm off on a tangent already. Let me get back to what I was about to talk about. The score is amazing. You know the score is iconic. I used to actually have the album version of the score. When I was in high school, I found the album at a tag sale, and I also bought a record player at the same tag sale so I could play the Halloween album. A lot of times this fact gets a little bit overlooked, and that's the fact that this was co-written by Deborah Hill. John Carpenter gets all the glory for this movie because he is the director, and he also did the iconic soundtrack to the movie. But this movie was co-written by Deborah Hill, and I feel like more people should acknowledge that. One of the coolest things about this movie is that the neighborhood in which it takes place looks like 1,000 different places in the 50 different states of America, and that makes it even creepier because it could be your neighborhood. This movie is credited with being very influential on the slasher genre, and it is. I don't want to take away from that, but I feel like it owes a debt not only to Psycho, because everyone always notes the obvious comparison to Psycho, especially because of the knife that Michael Myers uses and that Norman Bates' mother used. Not going to spoil that one either. But it also owes a debt to Dementia 13, and people do not speak about that movie enough. It came out the same year as Psycho, but a lot of the things that are now used and reused tropes in slasher movies were originated in Dementia 13, even down to the character that strips down into their underwear and goes swimming in a lake, down to point of view shots. There were point of view shots in Psycho, but there was a little bit longer point of view shots in Dementia 13, and when you watch Halloween, those point of view shots are even longer, which I would even say lingering. The shots linger because there are some voyeuristic aspects to some of the things that the Shape, aka Michael Myers, does. Like when he's walking around the neighborhood and you see him from his point of view looking in people's windows, it kind of lingers to give you that kind of voyeuristic, creepy feel. I could also add that Black Christmas did a few things before Halloween that Halloween gets a lot of credit for. And I think Black Christmas came out in 1973, if I'm not mistaken, and Halloween is 1978. So there's a lot of things that Halloween gets a lot of credit for that they were not the originator of. They just really expanded upon it. Not to undersell Halloween, because there were some things done with cinematography that revolutionized horror movie making. Just the variety of filmmaking techniques that were used in this Halloween movie. As I was watching, this is the first time I've watched it and actually sat and kind of took note of all the different things that I was seeing, aside from just enjoying it as a movie and enjoying the story, actually looking at how it's made. And the different things that I happened to notice were I talked about the point of view shots already, the wide shots. There's these really gorgeous wide shots that you see of the neighborhood, and it really makes you feel like you're inside the picture. Still shots. There's still shots where the director really allows you to sit there and see what you're seeing. It doesn't show you and then flash to something else. That's always annoying to me in some movies. I feel like, let me see what you're trying to show me. A great example of this is when Laurie and her friend are walking from school and Michael Myers steps from behind the hedge, and the point of view is a still shot looking over Michael's shoulder of the girls walking down the street. The camera doesn't move. When the shot starts, it's of the girls walking down the street in the hedge, and then Michael Myers actually moves into frame, stepping from behind the hedges, and you just see him and you just hear him breathing and watching the girls, and it just lets you linger on that moment and for an uncomfortably long time, so that is very effective. This movie does a lot of what is known as the American shot, which is shooting the characters from the knee up. And I actually like that. You know, I've complained, if you've watched my videos before, I've complained about a lot of newer horror movies being too close up on actors, being like all up their noses, all so close to them I can count the pores in their faces. That is so unnecessary. Pull back. The use of shadows and silhouettes was done so well. A lot of times when you see Michael Myers, he was in shadow, and really in the script he's known as the Shape. He's described as the Shape, and they actually really emphasize that by showing him as a silhouette, by showing him as just this figure more so than a person. They also play a lot with focus. Not everything is in focus. Like one of the most iconic shots is when Laurie is sitting there and you see Michael Myers in the background and he's out of focus, and they never put him in focus, because you're meant to kind of go from regarding Laurie to noticing what's happening in the background and fearing for her as she doesn't know what's happening in the background. I almost forgot to notice about shadows and Michael Myers coming out of the shadows. There's another iconic scene where Laurie is standing there and there's just darkness behind her, and then you see just a little teensy bit of the mask, then a little bit more, then a little bit more, till you fully see his face coming out of the darkness. That was, I mean, stuff like that it's just done so well. The cinematic elements of this movie were done so well that the director of Friday the 13th, is it Cunningham? What's his last name, I believe? Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. He said that he watched Halloween repeatedly and studied it before he made Friday the 13th because of a lot of those cinematic elements. The dialogue in this movie is very interesting. There's a scene where a graveyard attendant starts to tell Dr. Loomis this story, and the story is actually kind of interesting, and then Dr. Loomis cuts him off before he's able to finish. I really appreciate the fact that they took the time to put so much detail into this story that the graveyard attendant was telling, knowing that it's going to be cut off in the script. And it's realistic. Sometimes people get cut off in conversations. Sometimes people talk over each other. These things are more realistic to dialogue, and I feel like some newer horror movies don't do that. They make the dialogue less realistic because they don't have these things happen. Another great thing that this movie does is it defies expectation. It'll have a character do something that you think is going to lead to a scene ending one way, and then it completely circumvents that and has the scene end in a way that you didn't expect. And for those that have seen it, I'm talking about, we'll say, the laundry room scene. You think one thing's going to happen, but then it doesn't happen, and then something else happens. The musical cues are superbly well timed. There are times when there's no music at all, and they make really good use of silence, and then obviously other times that incredible score comes in. And there's a particular scene where you see the shape do something just before the musical cue comes in. And if this were a newer slasher pick, they would have timed it so that the musical cue comes in right at the same time as him doing that action. And it's not as jarring as when he does the action and then there's a musical cue, if you know what I mean. And for those who've seen the movie, I'm talking about the car scene. Now, with that said, this movie's not flawless. I mean, Laurie does do some stupid horror movie stuff, like use a weapon and then immediately discard it without knowing whether you're going to need that weapon again. I can't even say it's a trope, because this might have been one of the first movies that a character did that. It's a trope now because it's 40 years later and we've seen it over and over and over and over and over again. But then it probably wasn't a trope, I'm guessing. A funny thing that I noticed was that when Laurie's babysitting, the little girl is watching The Thing. And I thought that was so funny because a couple years later, John Carpenter ends up remaking The Thing. Well, he probably had designs on remaking it, which is why he had it in this movie. But I thought that was kind of a cute little thing that he put in there. And I really, really love how he ended the movie. And the still shots of the different rooms in the house. I thought that's just amazing, and I think that's one of the reasons why this movie is so rewatchable. I mean, I can never say, oh, I'm tired of watching Halloween, because it really is something you could watch year after year, and find just little things that you didn't notice before. Now I'm going to go watch part 2, and I'll be right back in a moment with my thoughts on that. What's really cool about part 2 is that it picks up right where part 1 leaves off. As a matter of fact, it actually re-shows the last scene from part 1 as it continues the story. And I wish more horror movies would do that with sequels. These sequels always want to try to be so different from each other and so, out of pocket, when why not just continue the story where it left off? Since I started talking about the score in the first one, I'm going to talk about the score in this one as well at the beginning rather than at the end of my review. And it's interesting because this movie starts off with Mr. Sandman, which I think is a song from the 1950s. Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream. Bum, 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 bum. Make him the cutest that I've ever seen. Bum, 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 bum. Give him 2 lips like roses and clover. Bum, bum, bum. Then tell him that his lonesome nights are over. But it seems so out of place, but yet perfect for what's actually happening in the movie. And then the movie continues to go on to its original theme, the iconic score that John Carpenter did. John Carpenter came back and apparently remixed it, because if you notice, it's it's the same but different, if that makes any sense to you. It's like, was John Carpenter the first person to do a remix? I don't know, but he came back and remixed the same theme that he had. And like in the first one, the score is used very strategically. There's times when there's silence and that's used very effectively, and then there's times when the score is used and that's equally as effective. John Carpenter is a director. Wait, did he do part 2? Can't remember. This is a director that knows when to use silence. For part 2, the screenplay was written by John Carpenter and Deborah Hill again. But in this one, remember how in the last one I said that someone was watching The Thing on television? In this one, someone's watching George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead. And I really love the beginning of that movie for this one line, and I don't know why it's so funny to me, but when the guy's like, "They're coming to get you, Barbara," and Barbara's like, "You are so ignorant." I don't know why. That always cracked me up when she called him ignorant. Of course, the point of view shots are back. The cinematography in these first 2 Halloweens is just gorgeous. I cannot say enough about it. I think it's the #1 thing that lifts these above other slasher movies is the way that they are shot. And dare I say that Steven Spielberg cribbed the lens flares off of John Carpenter? But Spielberg did give us the push-pull, so I guess we're a little even. Speaking of camera work, I don't know whether I mentioned in the first movie, because they did it in the first movie and they did it again in this one. I really liked the point of view shots that instead of it being directly from the Shape's point of view, the camera kind of hovers a little bit over his shoulder, as if you were walking with him. I also like how the focus has now moved from the teenage babysitters to the staff at the hospital. Because to me, people who work in hospitals are very interesting people. That's why there's so many shows about people who work in hospitals. But then I might have a bias because there's so many people in my family that work in hospitals. Both of my grandmothers were nurses at UConn Medical Center. One was a registered nurse and the other one was a nurse practitioner. My grandfather was a dietitian after he got out of the army, and my aunt was an x-ray technician. So I grew up surrounded by hospital people. And my grandmother used to have these Christmas parties, and the hospital staff used to come to her house for Christmas in shifts. Like when they would just have the party all night, because, you know, you have the nurses that work first shift, second shift, third shift, and the doctors and the orderlies and all these different types of people. And they were always very interesting people to me. Actually, I misspoke. This is, in the movie, it's technically not a hospital, it's a clinic. Which leads me to one of my favorite scenes, the hot tub scene. Just the carnage that you can create with scalding hot water is amazing. The only thing that bothers me about that scene is when the nurse thinks that the hand over her shoulder is her boyfriend and she starts sucking his fingers and it's really Michael Myers. How could she not taste the dirt, blood, and the stench of death on this man's hands? I mean, this is so gross. This is a sequel that introduces into the story the fact that Laurie Strode is Michael Myers' sister. And while I felt like this was a very, very strong follow-up, it's still not quite as good as the first one for me, for a couple reasons. Number one, the Shape can walk through a glass door. Okay. Laurie Strode's wig. Hard to not focus on that. And the scene when he breaks through that cheap-ass balsa wood door towards the end of the movie. But then I could just be nitpicking, because once you see a movie like 25 times, you're going to start to find something that you don't care for in it. That said, this is still a really solid sequel. Funny little thing that I noticed after all these times rewatching it is the character that gets hit by the car. When they speak about him in this movie and they say his name, having watched the first one and the second one back to back, I just finally picked up on the fact that that was the guy that Laurie's friend had set her up to go to the dance with. And I don't know why. Well, you know why? Because I probably never sit there and watch these back to back like that. Even when AMC does their Halloween marathons, for some reason, whenever I turn on AMC, they're always playing 4 or 5, and I'm not as interested in 4 and 5. So this is the first time I've sat down and watched 1 and 2 back to back. So maybe that's why I didn't pick up on this earlier. But like I said, solid sequel. I just prefer the first one to the second one if someone were to ask me, but still, both great movies. I'm going to go ahead and watch part 3, Season of the Witch. Let me know what you thought about Halloween, the original Halloween 1978, and Halloween 2. And also, let me know, how old were you when you first saw either of the Halloween movies? Did you get to see them in the theater? Did you watch them on VHS? If you're younger and you just found these movies streaming, what's your reaction to these classic slasher movies? Let me know in the comments. Hey, let's talk about Halloween Season of the Witch, or what I think should have just been called Season of the Witch. This is the sequel that kind of threw everyone off because it did not feature Michael Myers as the villain. He technically is in the movie as he's played on television, like the trailer plays for the first Halloween in one scene, and then a character's watching a scene from Halloween in another part of the movie. So he technically is in Season of the Witch, it's just not about him. This is what I call an unsuccessful branding attempt on John Carpenter's part. However, as a standalone movie, it's still a pretty good movie. John Carpenter initially decided that he wanted Halloween to be an anthology series, and I feel like that idea would have worked had part 2 been a totally different story. Because after part 1, if you put part 2 as a different story, people would have went with it. But after you've done 2 movies, you've already kind of created a brand, and you've created a brand association of the Halloween name with Michael Myers or the Shape. So when you come back on a third attempt and try to rebrand it, people don't take to it as well. This movie stars Tom Atkins, who is a certified Scream king because he was in The Fog and then he was in Creepshow. Don't forget who puts the friggin' food on the table. I had to say that line. After this, he was in Night of the Creeps. He was walking around talking about Thrill Me. And for me, if you're in 3 or more horror movies, you're a certified Scream Queen or Scream King. In this, Atkins plays a doctor who has to try to unravel the mystery surrounding one of his patients' deaths. The movie opens with a man being chased with some men in suits, and he narrowly escapes them and runs into a gas station where he passes out, and just before he passes out, he says, "They're coming." The gas station attendant or mechanic ends up taking him to the hospital, and he is a great example of the saying, "There are no small roles, only small actors," because for some reason, even though he only had 1.5 scenes, that actor really stood out to me. And I haven't seen him in any other movie, but he just really stood out to me, the actor that played the mechanic gas station attendant. The man who was being chased and is admitted to the hospital passes away. I won't say how because, like I said, I'm not spoiling these for the younger people. And his daughter comes to identify the body. Since some things regarding his death seem odd and out of the ordinary, the daughter and the doctor, she and the doctor work together to try to solve the mystery of who killed her father and why. This director uses some of the same camera work or techniques that were used in part 1 and part 2. There are some still shots where the camera doesn't move and you just see the whole room and the characters walk in and out of frame. And I feel like those type of things tied this movie to the first 2 as far as how it's made, its level of production. There's also some really great wide shots that make excellent use of the locations. And they make use of shadows, as some of the men in suits are shown in shadow or in silhouette, similar to the way The Shape was in the first 2 movies. The lighting in these first 3 Halloweens is so good. I can't even... That's why I'm so hard on trash like Terrifier. The makers of that movie lit it horribly and shot it even worse. Slasher movies aren't just movies about killers and gore. At their core, slasher movies are mystery, suspense, thrillers with elevated levels of violence. You can't leave out the mystery, you can't leave out the suspense, you can't leave out the thrill. It's not just, oh, I have a killer in a costume and some people to be killed. No, it's deeper than that. It's more than that. But then I've already talked about how and why Terrifier is garbage. And that concludes my TED Talk on how not to make a trash-ass so-called slasher movie in 2018. Anyway, the doctor and the daughter of the deceased man share a motel room, and for some reason this movie thinks that we want to see a sex scene with Tom Atkins. No, thank you. He's a great actor, no doubt, but I was slightly grossed out by his scenes with the actress who was half his age. Fun fact, the older woman that was also staying in the motel named Marge Gutman, that's Tom Atkins' actual real-life wife, and she's way more age-appropriate. Speaking of wives, in this movie his character also has an ex-wife that they show briefly, and she is actually played by the same actress that was in the first Halloween that was trying to hook Laurie up with a date. And for a minute I thought this was also the same actress that was dancing in the living room in Creepshow, the segment called Father's Day. I thought that was the same actress because she looks like her, or at least to me I thought that looked like her, but it's actually a different actress. But they definitely favor each other. Speaking of motels, this motel reminds me of a motel I used to drive past on the Berlin Turnpike on my way to work. It looked like all these little houses lined up. I used to work at AT&T Cable, and my shift was, I think it was 3 p.m. to 11 or 4 p.m. to midnight. I just know it was second shift. And I did customer service, which like 70% of my time was telling elderly people to turn their television to channel 4. About 20% of my time was telling men who didn't want a woman telling them how to set up their cable with their surround sound with their gaming system. And that would always take a half an hour of me telling them how to set up their system and then them completely ignoring my directions, doing all these other crazy things, and then finally doing what I told them to do and then saying, "Oh, you were right." Well, no shit, Sherlock. I told you that a half an hour ago, but you had me on the phone. Because you hear a female voice, I couldn't possibly know which things to plug into other things. But that's a rant for another day and another time. Anyways, oh, I almost forgot that I said 70%, 20%, so 10%. The other 10% was getting cursed out when a pay-per-view event was not streaming properly. nothing I can do about that. Sometimes satellites are down, sometimes there's technical difficulty, sometimes you're not going to get to see somebody get punched in the face. But go ahead, curse me out for 20 minutes and it makes you feel better. I'm going to put you on mute and color in my coloring book, which I used to keep a little coloring book in my cubicle just for those moments, because I'm just going to put you on mute. I might put you on mute and walk away and go get a coffee and come back and you're still cursing at me. I did that a couple times. That's probably why we got replaced. That's why when you call customer service, it's not even in America anymore. It's in India, because Americans like me will put you on hold and walk the fuck away. Anyways, what was I talking about? Anyway, I used to drive by a place that looked like that motel, and it was really creepy looking at night, because I would be driving home from night, either 11 o'clock or midnight. Can't remember what time I got off. I just know it was late. And when I would drive by that motel on the turnpike, and the Berlin Turnpike itself is kind of creepy to me. If you're from Connecticut, you know, or Central Connecticut, not Southern Connecticut, probably wouldn't know the Berlin Turnpike, but if you're from Central Connecticut, you know what I'm talking about. It was just creepy. So that kind of, affected me a little bit when watching this movie as well. The villain, Mr. Cochran, was excellent. I like how his motivations were informed by Celtic lore and how they infused Stonehenge and what he did with pieces of Stonehenge and witchcraft. And I think he also mentioned, I apologize to anyone who's from Ireland who, if I mispronouncing the word, but he said he was tying some things back to Samhain.
Samhain is an ancient Celtic pagan festival celebrated on the 1st of November that marks the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter, or the darker half of the year. It's also the Irish language name for November. But how do you pronounce it correctly? Break it in two. The first syllable is sow, that rhymes with cow. Sow. And the second syllable is in, as in to go into or inside. In. Put it all together now. Samhain. Samhain.
Which is the, I think it's the original, I want to say Druid, but it might be considered pagan holiday that Halloween comes from. Another thing I want to say about the way this movie was filmed. The shots towards the end of the children sort of marching with their masks on were superbly well done. Just the way that they're lined up is just beautiful. And it has a slight creepiness to it. There is a reveal at the end of this movie, which I will not spoil no matter how old this movie is, because I really respect my younger viewers. Well, I should say I respect all my viewers, but I don't want to rob my Generation Z viewers of the surprise and the experience of watching this movie, because they are just now watching these movies. They're available for streaming, so to them, they're receiving all these movies at the same time. They're receiving a movie from 1983 at the same time they're receiving a movie from 2018. And they're not going to have the same nostalgia for it that older viewers have. But I think from my interactions with them that they definitely have the same respect for it. And I think that's really cool. So to recap, this movie was a poor attempt at rebranding, but as a standalone film, an excellent film in my opinion. The acting was good. The story was good. The soundtrack, still great. Different, but still great. And by the way, John Carpenter actually came back and scored this third movie. And I think he also executive produced it. As I said, the cinematography definitely holds up against the first two movies. I had just finished talking about how interesting of a concept the story was. And although this was written and directed by Tommy Lee Wallace, who actually replaced Joe Dante as the original director who was supposed to work on this, Wallace has said that he actually got the idea of witchcraft in the age of computers from Deborah Hill. And in case you don't remember, or you didn't watch my review for the first two Halloween movies, Deborah Hill co-wrote Halloween 1 and 2. So it's very interesting that she also came up with the concept for Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. I really appreciate this movie, and I think it really deserves more credit than what it gets. I think some people act salty or butthurt about it because it's not centered on Michael Myers, but as a standalone movie, it is great in its own right, and I really think more people should watch it. Did you see Halloween 3 Season of the Witch? What are your thoughts on it?
One more day to Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. One more day to Halloween, Silver Shamrock. One more day to Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. One more day to Halloween, Silver Shamrock.
Just one more day, only 24 hours, but that's plenty of time to pick out one of the big Halloween 3, yes, 3 horrific masks to choose from. And remember the Horror-thon, 9 o'clock tomorrow night. One more day, the clock is ticking.
One more day to Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. One more day to Halloween, Silver Shamrock. One more day to Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. One more day to Halloween, Silver Shamrock.
Good morning, party people. I'm up, as my grandmother would call it, 4 in the morning to try to get out these Halloween videos. So let's continue on with Halloween 4, Return of Michael Myers. I was confused 4 and 5 because one is Return of Michael Myers and the other one's Revenge of Michael Myers. Also, these are the two that are always playing on AMC for some reason. Or at least that's how I always catch them, even though I don't think I've seen either of them end to end, uncut, without commercials. I usually catch it somewhere in the middle, get bored, and turn it off. So this is almost going to be like watching them for the first time. These next 3 videos are going to be a little bit more detailed and spoilery because once you're 4 deep into a franchise, who cares? And I think I already told y'all to watch the Halloween movies. If I haven't, I'm telling you now, even the bad ones. This actually has a great opening sequence with a lot of static shots of like these middle America, rural town settings, and the majority of it is shot in near silence. Then we get in giant lettering executive producer Mustafa Akkad's name because he wants to let you know that he funded this film. Then suddenly it cuts to a dark and stormy night and we see 2 medical professionals preparing to transport Michael Myers because we learned nothing from any of the previous Halloween movies about trying to transport Michael Myers. The security guard gives us some quick exposition in the elevator at the mental facility and presents us with this line, Jesus ain't got nothing to do with this place. And then finally, that familiar Halloween theme music kicks in as they get Michael Myers into the transport vehicle. Michael was pretty much chilling in his comatose state until the medics were discussing whether he had any living relatives. And at the mention of him having a niece, you know how Michael feels about having living relatives. You can't have that. Got to go stab them all up. So he wigs out, kills the medical personnel, and he's off on his way looking for his niece, who is played by a very young Danielle Harris, who to me in this gives me a dark-haired Carol Ann. She was adorable though. The first sequence with her and we'll call it the closet scene, was very tense and suspenseful, and it was filmed really well. I liked that sequence with the closet. I thought that was done very well. So basically, in a nutshell, part 4 is just about Michael Myers trying to kill his niece and all the people that get in the way. Now with even more Dr. Loomis. And I mean that. In this movie, Donald Pleasence has a much larger role, and we get a lot of scenes of him trying to track down Michael Myers. And what do you know? Michael Myers kills another mechanic because where else is he going to find a blue jumpsuit? I forgot to mention that little Danielle Harris that plays Michael Myers' niece is named Jamie in this. And there's some scenes that are kind of reminiscent of the first Halloween with her getting bullied at school in a similar fashion to the way Tommy Doyle was bullied in school in the first Halloween, except her bullying's a lot worse because they're like chanting about her mom being dead, and just, it was pretty bad. We also get introduced to her older foster sister, Rachel, who is unhappy about having to babysit Jamie on Halloween. Rachel hates this because she really wanted to go out with this missing link looking dude that works at a drugstore named Brady. Remember how in part 3 I talked about the gas station attendant and I mentioned the saying, there's no such thing as small roles, only small actors? The winner of that award in this movie goes to the drunk priest who gives Dr. Loomis a ride into town. This movie gets a little bit draggy in the last 30 minutes until little Carol Ann, I mean Jamie, ends up on the roof. And this director really put that little girl on a roof. I didn't see like a little person stunt double or anything. I believe I saw little Danielle Harris on a roof. I also kind of like how it ended because it did tie it to the very beginning of Halloween. And it made use of the aspect of Jamie being Michael Myers' niece and having similar traits as him. While this movie was not nearly shot as well as the first 3 movies, it was lit very well. There's very, very few wide shots as in the previous movies, and I kind of miss those. And a lot of the action was shot closer than I would have preferred. Gone are the knees up, American shots. Aside from the opening, not a lot of static shots where characters walk into frame as in the first 3 movies. So I kind of miss those too. This one wasn't as bad as I remembered. I think I probably turned it off when it was on television because if you don't catch it right from the beginning, it's a little bit harder to get into. And I really feel like these movies lose something when they're played on commercial television. Like the momentum and the suspense is kind of broken up when you have this nice tense moment and then all of a sudden you get like, you know, one of those laughable Geico commercials and that completely breaks the tension and then it makes it harder to get back into the movie. This review has turned out to be a little bit shorter than I usually do, but there isn't a whole lot to say about this film. I didn't talk about the kills because they really aren't that memorable to me. I did like Danielle Harris as a little actress. The actress that played the teenagers, not so much. This was just alright. That's all I can say is it was just alright. Not good, not horrible, just alright. So now I'm going to check out part 5 and I'll be back in a moment. Man, I think my last video was really, really low energy. And this was probably going to be low energy too because I don't usually record first thing in the morning. I'm not a morning person. My personality hasn't even turned on yet. Oh, before I get started on part 5, I watched these almost back to back, but then I was sent out to KFC to get some food. And if you live in Orlando, you know the best KFC is in Pine Hills on Hiawassee. So I drove all the way to Pine Hills on Hiawassee to get some KFC, only to find out that they actually deliver. I didn't know that they delivered because they weren't listed on Uber Eats. But as I went through the drive-thru, I see a big sign on the window, "Oh, we deliver through Grubhub." They want you to have all these different apps to get some food. But even then, they might not have delivered all the way across to almost the other side of Orlando. I don't know if it's like that in other places where, you know, there's certain chain restaurants and you just know, oh, don't go to this one and this location because it's not as good as this one on that location. It was like that in Connecticut. There were certain Dunkin' Donuts that you didn't go to if you want your order correct. As I said earlier, part 5 is another one that was always playing on AMC, but I've never watched it from end to end without commercial interruption. And fortunately, they have 4 and 5 on Shudder. They just have 1, 4, and 5 on Shudder. Executive producer Mustafa Akkad is back because his name appears before even the first credit. And then Donald Pleasance's name appears because it just says Donald Pleasance in because he's now the star of the Halloween franchise at this point. And that lets us know how much Loomis time we're going to get in this movie. Cut to the Halloween title with the jankiest slashing noises ever. But wait, there's more. Then they reveal that the object being slashed is a pumpkin. And I'm like, we're in for a real cornball experience. This movie sort of acts like it's picking up right where the last one left off because we see little Jamie and her cousin Rachel in the car and they're about to hit Michael Myers with the car, but it kind of erases the ending of part 4 that we saw Jamie pretty much turning into Michael Myers mentally. Dr. Loomis and the police show up only to have Michael Myers get away by crawling into like a river and swimming away. I shit you not. Well, actually, he more so casually floats downstream than actually swims, but it's still trash. Finally, he staggers into the home of an old man that has a pet parrot, and then he collapses just before he's able to harm the old man. Cut to a year later, and little Jamie's in the Haddonfield Children's Clinic. Then at this point, the movie reimagines the ending of part 4 as just a bad dream of Jamie's. And if you didn't know Michael Myers was a jerk-ass, then you know it now, because he wakes up after a year of this man taking care of him and kills the old man with a parrot. Let me rephrase that because the sentence structure was completely wrong and I just made it seem as though Michael Myers took a parrot and killed the old man. What I meant to say is that he killed the old man who had a pet parrot. Anyway, this movie establishes that Jamie and Mikey have a psychic connection. By the way, for some reason Jamie is upgraded from foster sister to stepsister in this for reasons. This movie is shot so bad it can't even get the point of view shots right. And seriously, what is up with the jaunty, happy sitcom music when the dog goes missing and the two police come to help out. Like, that, it was so out of place. And don't even get me started on the mask. The mask and the hair, it was all so wrong. I'm not even going to call it a Great Value mask. I'm going to call it a Save-A-Lot off-brand mask. And if you're watching this video and you're not in the United States, Save-A-Lot is a discount grocery store, and it has a lot of items that are named kind of after other items. Like, for example, if you were looking for Dr. Pepper and you went to Save-A-Lot, they would have it there as Dr. Thunder. Instead of Mountain Dew, they have Mountain Holler. Instead of Rice Krispies, they have Crispy Rice. And this mask is like the Crispy Rice of this franchise. And then, just as I said that the movie reimagined the ending of part 4 as a bad dream for Jamie, it turns right around and mentions that Jamie did stab someone at the end of part 4. So that wasn't a bad dream, it was a memory, but this movie hasn't made up his mind. Then on top of that, Dr. Loomis thinks that scaring the hell out of Jamie is going to help her to tell him where Michael Myers is. This really should have been called Halloween 5, the night he ran out of fucks to give, because Michael is truly an asshole in this. Like, this one guy, he's, you know, really into his car. Michael just walks up and takes like this little gardening tool. I forgot what its real name is, but it has like 3 little things that curve like this, and it has a handle. Whatever you call that gardening tool. He takes and scratches across the back of the guy's car. Then when the guy gets upset with him, like, what are you doing? He takes that to his head. Now, I was like, what was the point of even scratching his car? You could have just walked up and killed him, but you had to scratch his car because in this movie, you're just being a complete jerkass. Most of the acting in this is pretty bad. Even Donald Pleasance is kind of chewing the scenery and really, really overdoing it as Dr. Loomis. Some of the best acting is with the little kids. And there was such a cute scene where the little boy gave Jamie some flowers and this little gold bracelet, and she kissed him on the cheek. And so much of the acting, because the little boy is presented as having a really bad stutter and Jamie's character is mute because of extreme trauma, most of their acting is just done with their faces. And for them to be 2 little kids, they really did that very, very well. And the scene itself was super cute. Dr. Loomis runs around town continuing to yell at people and make demands, and then this shadowy figure with cowboy boots shows up for no reason. Then I start thinking, is this PG-13? I'll look it up when I finish recording this, because the kills in this, there was a lot of cutaways and they weren't as graphic as we got accustomed to in part 2 and part 4. It was almost as if they had to pay $100 an ounce for the fake blood, so they just dripped it on very sparingly. The chase through the forest was pretty engaging, and I feel like the movie should have ended right after that, because all the momentum screeches to a halt and then it just gets super boring. I started feeling really sleepy watching this, and it was 7:41 p.m. But again, that could have been the KFC. You know, you eat stuff like that and you get the itis. Then I remembered that we still hadn't found out who the dark shadowy figure with the cowboy boots was. Then we get this scene where Jamie's in the attic and Michael Myers is just about to get her, and they make like a little psychic connection, and she says, "Uncle Boogeyman, let me see," and he starts to take off his mask. The camera zoomed in on one single tear coming down Michael Myers' face, and then little Jamie says, "You're just like me." And when she goes to touch him, you know, he snaps back into his psycho killer mode and tries to start stabbing her, but she dodges it and he stabs the spot where she was standing at. But the single tear, I can't with this movie. And it's a wonder why I have virtually no memory of this movie, even though it plays on television every year. I think the mind tends to block out traumatic experiences. So maybe this movie was just on a level that it's so bad that it's traumatic. The movie ends with Michael in a holding cell, shackled and awaiting, wait for it, transport. Because they're always trying to transport Michael Myers from one place to another place. And judging by the trailer for the new 2018 version, I feel like they might be trying to transport his ass again. Just stop trying to move Michael Myers anywhere. Leave his ass right where he's at. Anyway, then the shadowy cowboy boot dude shows up and we hear a whole bunch of rapid gunfire inside the police station, and Michael Myers is out and on the loose again. So we never even find out who shadowy cowboy boot man is or why he busted Michael out of Hooskow. Funny thing, when I was making that note to myself and I wrote out Hooskow, I thought, well, where does that term come from? Why do we call jail the juzgado? So I looked it up, and it actually comes from the Spanish juzgado, which means the court of justice, or the verb juzgar, to judge. I just thought that was interesting because I wondered where that term came from, because I've heard of jail being called a juzgado before. Anyway, this movie is such trash, and I really feel sorry for people who paid to go watch this in the movie theater. The only real positive in this movie, besides the acting of the little kids, is the lighting. They always get the lighting right in these movies. Even when the shots aren't as great, it's lit so well. And I think it stands out to me so much because of how badly Terrifier was lit. I'm going to keep bashing Terrifier until the end of this year. Last year, my movie to bash was Bye Bye Man. The year before that, it was The Gallows. So I think I'm going to continue this trend where each year I'm just going to pick the worst movie that I saw, and I'm going to keep bringing it up at random times just because I'm offended that I've wasted my time that I'll never get back. But really, Terrifier was lit like ass. I'm going to go and watch part 6 right now, and I'll let you know what I think about it in just a moment. Part 6 came out, I was like, that's alright, I'm good on that. So I've never watched part 6. The only 2 Halloween movies that I've actually seen in the theater were Halloween H2O and Halloween Resurrection, which hopefully I can get to watch both of those today, as soon as I find out where they're playing. Hopefully I'll find it on Amazon Prime, because I don't recall seeing them on Netflix, and they're definitely not on Shudder. And this one starts off with, you guessed it, title card of Mustafa Akkad, executive producer. This is a dude that wants you to know that he financed these films, and he can live with that shame. It's funny, he was on that Tyler Perry, Steven Spielberg stuff way back in the day. Like, put my name first. Don't even show the title of the movie. Put Mustafa Akkad first. And then for some reason, this movie starts out in Freddy's boiler room, where not Amanda Kruger is going into labor. She gives birth to a baby, and then I think it's Cowboy Boots Man that takes the baby into another room with a bunch of candles and looks like maybe some druids. Then we get some expositional voiceover as we see the druid drawing something onto the baby's stomach in what looks like blood. And I immediately see what's drawn on the baby's stomach, and I recognize it as a rune. But it was hard for me to tell which rune it was. At first I thought it was Wunjo, but that is the rune of happy endings, so I guess that was not going to be it. It ended up being Thurzaz, which in the movie they call Thorn. And yeah, I have a whole stack of runestones because sometimes I cast out runestones. But Thurzaz, or also known as Thorn, is the rune of boundaries. And it also is knowing where and when you must stop, which I found kind of interesting, but also, what does this have to do with anything in the movie? It is kind of cool, but if you want to know about runestones, you could get a book from Barnes & Noble and learn, or go to the library and learn about runestones. I think they come from Celtic culture, but I find them very interesting. It's really cool how you cast them. You're supposed to kind of focus on your intentions and the question that you're asking the runestones. Keep them in a bag like this, and you just shake up the bag. And there's multiple ways that you can cast out runestones. There's different formations that you can put them in, or you can freehand it, I guess you might say. But this aside from this movie, I just thought it was kind of cool that they added that Celtic rune thing, but they might have been reaching back to part 3 in a way, because in part 3 they brought up Celtic mythology and druids, etc. So then not Amanda Kruger escapes with the baby, and Michael Myers kills the woman that helps her to escape. A watered down version of the score starts to play with electric guitars, which I really didn't care for. And then after Michael kills this particular lady, he does his head tilt, but it doesn't come off the same. And I don't know whether it's the actor or whether it's the way it's shot. I can't put my finger on why the head tilt didn't work, but it just didn't. They do ramp back up the violence and gore, so I'm guessing this is definitely not PG-13. They keep flashing images at me, but it's too fast for me to see. I wear glasses, and sometimes it takes a moment for me to focus, and sometimes my pupils involuntarily kind of flex. They kind of like go like that. So it takes a moment for me to focus on something. So when something flashes that fast for me, I can't see it. That's why I can't enjoy the Transformer movies. Because when they have the fight scene, this is what I see. When the Transformers are fighting, that's what I see. And then I have to ask, well, who's winning? Are Decepticons winning? What's happening? All I see is flashes of silver. What's happening? So needless to say, those little flashy parts of the movie did nothing for me because I couldn't make out what they were trying to show me. And it's not like my eyesight's that bad. I just need the image to be on the screen for like a half a second longer so that I can take it in, so I can see what you're trying to show me. The escaped baby mama steals a truck, and then she stops at a bus station and calls into a radio station when she can't get through to 911. Michael Myers catches up to her, which unfortunately would not have happened had she not stopped at the bus station. If she had kept going when she stole the truck, he probably wouldn't have caught up to her. Meanwhile, Dr. Loomis is chilling at home, listening to the radio broadcast, and he tells a character that comes to visit him that he's retired. If it seems like I'm jumping around a lot, I'm not. This is exactly how the movie plays out. There's no transition. It just goes from scene to scene with nothing joining them together in a cohesive manner. Michael catches and kills the baby mama, but she tells him just before she dies that he can't have the baby, and she has already hidden the baby from it. So I'm sitting here thinking, this movie wants us to sit here and watch Michael Myers look for a baby. And I thought that Friday the 13th, where Jason was a worm that possessed people, was pretty bad. I forgot to mention that we did meet this family that's in turmoil. There is a single mother that has returned home with her son, and she lives with her parents and her brother. Her father acts like a complete abusive prick, even going so far as to call her child a bastard, and when she defends herself and her child, he smacks her in the face, to which her child responds by nearly stabbing the father in his mother's defense. For their part, her mother and her brother did try to defend her and talk down the father from being abusive towards her, but it didn't work. And also, their last name is Strode. So see, Rob Zombie wasn't the first to bring you a dysfunctional Strode family in a Halloween movie. Then we get to see little Tommy Doyle from part 1, and he's all grown up and played by Ant-Man. Other characters kind of drive by and they see him in the window and they give a little expositional dialogue as to why he's so traumatized, which he should be. Like, in the events of the first Halloween, those two little children would be extremely traumatized. Tommy Doyle, I'm going to try to call him Tommy Doyle anyways, goes to the bus station because he also heard the radio broadcast that received the phone call from the baby mama in distress. So he goes to the bus station looking for clues. He finds a little blood in a phone booth. For my Generation Z people, look up what a phone booth is. And he eventually finds the baby. He takes the baby to the hospital where he runs into Dr. Loomis. And eventually he just tells Dr. Loomis to meet him later. He also lets Loomis know that the baby is the last of Michael's bloodline. And at this point I'm thinking, so Mr. Cowboy Boots dude busted Michael Myers out of the Who Scout and got him some coochie? Insert a mental gif of Waka Flocka saying, okay, eventually I am going to start putting gifs and memes in these. It just takes me so long to edit right now that I don't do it, but once I get a little bit faster at editing, I'll probably add those. The baby being Michael Myers turns out not to be the case, but I will circle back around to that. Dr. Loomis shows up at the Strode household and tells the mother what happened previously in that house, which she had no idea about, but her husband did know when he purchased the house. He just doesn't tell her. So then Michael proceeds to hunt down each member of the Strode family because, as we've established, you know how Michael feels about living relatives. Although I'm not sure whether in this movie the Strodes are supposed to be related to... Yes, they are supposed to be related to him because it is mentioned in this movie. So like I said, Michael hunts down family members, wash, rinse, repeat. Ant-Man explains to the single mama that the symbol on the baby's stomach is thorn, and that his mother is Jamie, all grown up from parts 4 and 5. So no boom boom for Mike. Jamie probably was captured at the same time that Cowboy Boots man released Michael from the jail cell. He probably kidnapped little Jamie too, and eventually probably one of the druids raped her, and now we have another Myers relative. And this movie feels so 90s. It's like a time capsule of feeling 90s. And at this point of watching the movie, I started to get sleepy again, so much so that I set a timer on my cell phone just in case I fell asleep. But when I paused it and checked, there was only 21 minutes left of the movie, so I powered through it. There's something about the mask in this movie that's not quite right, but I can't put my finger on it. The druids show back up and take the baby and the single mother's little son, and they throw the single mother out the window, and then they take her too. Dr. Loomis and Ant-Man go and try to save them, and as they're going there, Dr. Loomis cocks his gun, and I almost started to laugh because I'm like, it's not like you haven't shot Michael Myers 11 times and it made no difference, so why even bother? Why even bother carrying a gun? It's not going to do anything. Michael Myers has been shot by Loomis so many times, his jumpsuit should look like Swiss cheese. Of course, he usually gets a new jumpsuit each movie, I think. I don't know. But Ant-Man was really good in this. I really liked his reaction when the lady with the stomach wound kind of jump scares him. He had a perfect reaction to that. Eventually, he's able to save the single mother, her son and the baby, and they run through Freddy's boiler room again to escape. The last 20 minutes of this movie felt like the longest 20 minutes ever. And then finally, Ant-Man gets the upper hand on Michael Myers, and we see a bunch of jump cuts that indicate that he bashed Michael Myers' head in. Then Tommy, sorry I kept calling him Ant-Man because that's what I see him as now, he's Ant-Man. Tommy, the single mother, her son, and the baby get in a car and they tell Dr. Loomis to come with them, and Dr. Loomis is like, nah, I got business to attend to. And so Dr. Loomis goes back into where Michael's body was, and you know what's gonna happen. Michael's not there. His mask is there, but Michael's not there. So that's letting us know, oh, we're gonna give you infinite sequels until you stop paying to see these. Fade to black and some generic 90s rock music starts playing over the credits. And I'm so glad I got through that, and I will never have to watch it again. One positive, the same positive that I said about part 5, whoever is the lighting crew in these movies, they really do their job. They are very well lit. What more can I say about that other than see, I almost did it. I almost brought up Terrifier, but I'm not going to do it. The point of view shots are back. They're done better than they were in part 5, but still not as good as they were in the first 2 movies. A lot of the camera work in this one was better than part 5, which is not hard to do because the camera work in part 5 was pretty bad. As far as the technical aspects of part 6, it's nowhere near as good as the first 3 movies were, but it was serviceable as a movie technically. Story-wise, that was a whole bunch of garbage. It was just too convoluted. Like, they could have just went back to Tommy and just had him dealing with his PTSD and trying to outrun Michael Myers and being the final guy. That's all you needed to do. All you needed to do was, Michael Myers is loose, he's coming after Tommy because Tommy witnessed what he did or whatever, and just be the movie of, and just have kills of all the people that got in Michael Myers' way of trying to get to Tommy, and then have Tommy be the final guy. There it is. That's all you have to do. These are the greatest thing about the first 2 Halloween movies that are Michael Myers centers, is that the premise is so simple. Michael Myers wants to kill this person. He kills other people who will get in the way of him killing that person. Why change that? The original 2 movies had a simple premise and excellent execution. These last 3 sequels that I just watched try to overload the story too much, and they just fail. This was a difficult watch for this almost 6 hours. Have you seen Halloween 4, 5, and 6? Did you get to see them in a movie theater? Did you watch them on DVD? Did you just catch the 4 and 5 that kept on playing on AMC? And what are your thoughts about them? Because, like I always say, just because I love something doesn't mean you won't hate it. Just because I hate something doesn't mean you won't love it. Let me know in the comments. I'm going to edit these and then try to see if I can watch H2O and Resurrection today and get those up. Can't promise you the Rob Zombie ones. I'll be honest, I don't want to rewatch those. They are such trash garbage. I don't want to rewatch them, but I will if I have to. I'm trying to work my way up to it. Maybe get the right kind of alcohol. We'll see. Hey guys, let's talk about Halloween H2O. I saw this one in a movie theater when it first came out, but I hadn't rewatched it since then. The movie opens with a nurse returning home, having found her house broken into, and there's 2 teenagers that are helping her, and I had completely forgotten that one of the teenagers was played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Also, the nurse mentioned that she's Dr. Loomis's nurse. You blink and you'll miss it, but she does mention that. This whole sequence is pretty much entertaining, very engaging, but there was something about it that was nagging at me, and it just felt so Friday the 13th more so than Halloween, and it just kept on bugging me, like, why does this feel so Friday the 13th? When I was preparing for this video, I looked up who the director was, and it's Steve Miner, who directed Friday the 13th, Part 2 and Part 3, so now it makes complete sense why that sequence felt very Friday the 13th as opposed to Halloween. And there is a difference. What he did with this is still miles above the last 3 sequels, and I'm talking about 4, 5, and 6. Producer Mustafa Akkad is back, however, his name is not first in the credits anymore. We get some exposition from a couple of detectives talking, then as the title sequence plays, we see newspaper clippings and we hear a voiceover by Dr. Loomis talking about how long he worked with Michael and how he's pure evil, just a refresher in case anyone forgot that. I assume that this one ignores the last 4 sequels and it's just a direct sequel from part 2. Jamie Lee Curtis is back, and now Laurie has become a headmistress at a private boarding school in California. She's still very much traumatized by what happened with Michael, and she has a teenage son with the worst haircut I've ever seen. I mean, look at this. It looks like a duck's butt. I don't think this was ever even in style during the time period that this movie came out. It's just, or at least where I'm from, maybe it was in style somewhere, but this is just wrong. Then a really cool moment happens in the film where we see Janet Leigh playing her secretary, which is really, really cool because Janet Leigh is her mother in real life, and one of the main reasons why Jamie Lee Curtis was even cast in the original Halloween is because John Carpenter was very much influenced by Psycho, and it just was like an added bonus to have the daughter of the star, so to speak, of Psycho in his slasher movie. So that was kind of a really cool moment. LL Cool J shows up as a security guard who is trying to start a career as a romance fiction writer, and he has the most annoying girlfriend or wife ever. Her phone conversation, she was just so irritating. I would have told her to shut the hell up. Granted, his writing was not great, but there's a way that you can offer criticism without tearing a person down. Also, it's not like he didn't have a job and he was just sitting at home on a couch talking about he's writing. He had apparently a full-time job, so if he's working on something on the side, why are you giving him grief over it? Remember how I just mentioned that the secretary played by Janet Leigh is Jamie Lee Curtis's mother? This movie thinks they're funny by having her actually say to Jamie Lee, or to Laurie, if I may be maternal for a moment. I got a chuckle out of that. And then they have her walk over to the car, which is the same car that she drove in Psycho. And if you don't get the hint, then they start playing a few bars of the music from Psycho, and if you look really close, on the license plate is Norman Bates' initials. The mask in this is really, really bad. I mean, it's hard to not notice how bad it is, and then it keeps changing, and at first I thought, well, are they using two different masks? After watching the movie and in preparing for this video, I found out they used 4 different masks, and it shows. There's a subplot about Laurie having a relationship with a guidance counselor. They also mentioned that she's divorced, but that part kind of didn't interest me at all, although he does try to help her. The score in this is terrible. I appreciate that they try to do something different and go in another direction, but it's almost jarring how different this score is. Until the very end when the familiar Halloween piano score actually kicks in. Another funny thing is, did you notice that when Laurie drove the kids to the gates and she told them to go down to so-and-so's house and call 911, it was almost in the exact same way that she told the children in part 1, and she even says, do as I say. I thought that was pretty funny. I can't get over how much his mask bugged in this movie. One of the best scenes in this movie is when Laurie actually takes a knife and shanks the shit out of Michael. He falls over the banister, which he seems to do a lot. And she goes down and starts to try to shank him some more, but LL Cool J stops her. The police come and the coroner zips up Michael's body in the body bag. But then Laurie steals the coroner's van and takes Michael on a ride because she wants to make sure he's dead. And there's a shot of her driving with Michael in the back. At first he's laying down, but then he sits up because that's what Michael does. And it really is reminiscent of that scene in part 1 where she's at the door frame and he's in the background. So that was a nice little homage to that. But she does something really smart and slams on the brakes, sending Michael through the windshield. And then she waits for him to get up and hits him again with the car. This is one thing that I do love about Laurie Strode's character. They don't write her as being stupid. The only one thing that she did that was silly was in the first Halloween, she discards a weapon after using it only one time. But she does end up getting another weapon, so that's not that bad. As Michael is laying on the ground, Laurie walks up to him and he shows a little tiny glimmer of humanity just before she decapitates him with an axe. And I remember when I saw this in a movie theater how the audience kind of clapped when that happened. There's no coming back from that, right? Fade to black and cut to a generic 90s sad emo / grunge rock track. Now that I've given you a brief recap, let's talk about the specifics. Like all the others, this one had great lighting. That's one thing that all the Halloween movies have, is great lighting. The camera work in this is better than 4 through 6, but not as good as 1 through 3. Speaking of 4 through 6, there actually was a scene in this movie where a student gives a report about the Haddonfield massacre and actually mentions Jamie and what happened to her. But that was cut out. They kept the story simple. Michael wants to kill his sister and he kills anyone that gets in the way of that. The end. The action in it was okay, wasn't awesome, wasn't bad, it was just okay. Check this out. I found some storyboards of one of the scenes from this movie. These look pretty cool and show the conceptual work that they put into this. They really show how they put some attention to detail and how they wanted this scene to play out, and I thought this was a really cool thing to find. This had some slow parts and the kids didn't stand out at all except Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I would have switched him and Josh Hartnett's characters, and I would have had Joseph play the son and have Josh play the hockey player that gets killed at the beginning. All in all, H2O was not a bad movie. It wasn't as awesome as I think we all thought that it was going to be, but it wasn't bad either. I'll be back in just a moment to talk about Halloween Resurrection. I saw this one also when it came out in the movie theater, and like the other one, I haven't seen it since. When I started watching it just now on demand, I actually rewound it because I missed Mustafa Akkad's name in the credits, and it did appear at the beginning of the movie. Isn't that a strange thing for me to look forward to? But I've seen so many of these, and I've grown accustomed to seeing Mustafa Akkad's name at the very beginning. I grouped these two together because they had rappers in them. The last one had LL Cool J and this one has Busta Rhymes, and they both feature Jamie Lee Curtis. At this point, Laurie is institutionalized, and Jamie Lee Curtis has a much better wig in this one than she had in part 2. This time the exposition is delivered by two nurses as they tend to Laurie, while we see scenes intercut from H2O. Except they add one little tidbit of information that Laurie decapitated the wrong guy, because somehow Michael Myers was able to crush the larynx of a guy and then put the mask on him. When and how he did this, who knows? Michael shows up to the mental institution to stalk Laurie because that's what he does. The mask is better in this than it was in the last one, but the hair is kind of inconsistent from shot to shot. So I'm guessing they used multiple masks in this as well. Unfortunately, Michael does eventually get Laurie, and then he gives his knife to a guy who's really obsessed with serial killers. This guy's babbling confirms that this story only recognizes 1, 2, and H2O. I mention that because the new Halloween 2018 hits the reset and only recognizes the original Halloween from 1978, so it's a direct sequel from part 1. Next, we get introduced to some college kids who are going to take part in a reality show that is going to be filmed in a Myers house. I can't even be bothered to learn their names because they are just cannon fodder. Busta Rhymes and Tyra Banks are in charge of the reality show. They are like producers or the production staff, not sure. But shout out to Tyra Banks, sister of the big forehead. You know, we have to support each other, us ladies with big foreheads. It's Tyra, Sade, Rihanna, and me. By the way, why does Busta Rhymes have 3 different hairstyles in one head? Like, he has a fade and cornrows and dreadlocks all happening at the same time. And I don't understand how or why this is a thing. Anyway, I remember thinking in 1998, who would record themselves going into a house where murders occurred for a reality show? That's crazy. Cut to current day and we have Zach Tightshirt McBigpants Baggins traipsing through Bob Mackey's tavern in the Lizzie Borden house. I used to call this show Ghost Dude, but it's actually called Ghost Adventures. Seriously, he looks like a Blink 182 fan from the year 2001. We also have Ghost Hunters and Paranormal Witness, etc., but they aren't as entertainingly bad as Ghost Hunters. So anyway, we actually have 3 groups of people. We have the students that are going inside the Myers house. We have the producers that are out in the production van, and we have another group of students that are at a Halloween party, but they're watching the live stream of the other students walking through the Myers house. One of the students in the Myers house has had kind of an online relationship with another student that's at the house party. And this movie kind of plays this up as this brand new wild thing. Imagine years later finding out that people would be catfishing each other. This movie is like a 90s time capsule because they mention chat rooms, and like I said, they treat online relationships as something extremely revolutionary. Little did they know 20 years later we'd all be communally watching reality television and roasting the participants on Twitter. By the way, shout out to my 90 Day Fiancé peeps and my 600-pound life peeps on Twitter. You guys make Sundays and Wednesday nights amazing. Because everyone has these head mount cameras, this movie is kind of partially found footage, and they actually make that footage look very realistic. One of the scenes I love because it's just so laughably funny is when Busta Rhymes comes face to face with Michael Myers, and they're both dressed as Michael Myers, and Busta, thinking that he's part of the crew, curses him out, and Michael just kind of stares at him, then does like a head tilt and walks away. Like he didn't know what to do with that. Maybe he considered Busta Rhymes crazier than him. Too crazy to kill. The kids walk through the house and get offed, get murked, get stretched, get whatever your regional terminology for killed to death is. All the while the kids at the party are watching a live stream of this all go down. The score in this really bugs too. They try to do something different, and it's like a large part of what Halloween is that score. And you just made the score sound like I Know What You Did Last Summer. The final girl tried to have a chainsaw fight with Michael, and that didn't work out. And then she just falls over, and there's like some cords on top of her, and she acts like she can't get up. But I'm like, why can't you get up? There's just some cords on top of you. Nothing heavy fell on top of you, and you're not tangled up within the cords. You're just laying there saying you can't get up. Like, maybe it was the way it was edited, but I did not see what harmed her and what made her feel like she couldn't get up. Then Busta Rhymes tries to kung fu fight Michael Myers. I'm not making this up. This is what is actually happening on the screen. And when that doesn't work, he electrocutes him in the dick and sets him on fire. I swear I'm not making this up. I know what I just said sounds like the rantings of a lunatic, but that's actually what happened in the movie. Michael gets taken to the morgue, and as the mortician is getting ready to examine him, his eyes open, because, you know, he's Michael Myers. That's what he does. He doesn't die. Does a lot of things, but he doesn't die. Well, actually, he doesn't do a lot of things. He kills people and he doesn't die. So he basically does 2 things. 3, if you count, you know, tilting your head. Sometimes he tilts his head. Roll credits. The acting is a little bit hit or miss. Some people are really good, some people are not so good. The dialogue is clunky as hell. The kills are pretty standard. Nothing that really stands out to me, nothing great, nothing bad, just standard for a Halloween movie. The pacing was pretty good. It was not boring. And this is the second movie in a row where a brother survived. LL Cool J survived H2O, and Busta Rhymes survived this movie. This other brother, this guy right here, he didn't survive. Spoiler alert. The technical aspects are always good with these movies. I can never complain about the lighting. 4 through 6 had a few camera work issues. This one was a little bit better. Not as good as H2O, but still decent. So no complaints too much there. As always, like I say, the lighting in these movies is, you know, just perfect. But did you see H2O or Resurrection? Did you see them in movie theaters? Did you just now happen to see them streaming? How old were you when you saw them? And what did you think? Let me know in the comments.
Trick or treat, motherfucker.
It stinks. For real, I don't even have to rewatch either of these movies to tell you that they're trash. I'm just going to tell you really briefly why they're trash and leave it at that. Let's start with Rob Zombie's Halloween, the first one. There's 2 major reasons why it's trash. Number 1, Michael Myers is evil because. That's it. Because. He was a little boy, he came from a nuclear family in the middle of the suburbs, probably upper middle class, beautiful home, for all intents and purposes, a perfect upbringing, and he still turned out evil, and that's the whole point. It's actually more realistic because how many serial killers come from the hood? Second reason, Rob Zombie's obsession with, we'll say quote unquote, poor white trash is insulting. My hometown had several classes of people. Around Naubach Avenue, Maple Street, Oak area was more upper middle class, and these people had parents that worked as engineers at Pratt & Whitney, or maybe they were business owners, or worked in administration or upper management in hospitals or colleges, that type of thing. Around Woody Crest, Shady Crest area was more working class people, and that's more like mechanics, maybe nurses, aides, people who worked in factories, those type of careers. Mayberry Village and Burnside Avenue had a little bit lower economic status because that's where the apartments were, where I think there was some Section 8 housing around that area as well. And it's funny because one of my aunts used to say, oh, you live in a white trash town, which is really insulting because, first of all, calling someone trash because of their economic status is elitist as fuck. Secondly, you're insulting me by proxy. Anyway, there was one high school in that town, and we all went to that same high school together, unless you went out of town to go to a vocational technical school, a Catholic school, or a private school, which almost happened to me. My father actually had me take the entrance exam for Loomis Chaffee, and I was this close to being sent away to boarding school. Luckily for me, I got waitlisted. Anyway, I say all that to say, guess who the assholes were in town? They weren't the kids in Woody Crest or Shady Crest, and they weren't the kids up in Mayberry Village or Burnside Avenue. They were the upper middle class kids with the popped up collars and the polo shirts. And you want to know what's really messed up? The people who did live Burnside, Mayberry Village, if they needed a ride home, this is how the conversation would go. Oh, can I get a ride with you? Where do you live? Mayberry Village? Oh, I don't drive through there. That's really messed up. My mother always gave them a ride home because my mother grew up on the north end of Harvard, so she wasn't afraid of no damn Mayberry Village. Rob Zombie has a fascination with lower class people, but it's really insulting to them. And it tells me that he's not one of them, nor does he know any of them. He just likes to cosplay as them 24/7. He thinks they look cool and just ascribes a hell of a lot of negative stereotypes to them. He paints them as abusive, dysfunctional, and the cause of murderous people. And like I said, serial killers typically don't come from the trailer park or the ghetto. And I'll tell you, it's not the kid with the long hair in shop class you have to worry about. It's the kid with the polo shirt and the flip collar named Brendan that you have to worry about. That's the real fucking sociopath.
Hey, buddy, just give you a heads up. I got a Taco Deluxe Supreme talking back at me, so I'm gonna be a while. So, do you mind waiting somewhere else and let me pass this beast in peace?
Let's talk about the 2 reasons why Rob Zombie's Halloween Part 2 is trash. Number 1, he made Laurie Strode an asshole. Who would care if Michael offed this insufferable bitch? Number 2, what the fuck is this? I'm just gonna leave it on the screen for a second and just let you take it in. Like really, what the fuck? Kill yourself. Plus, we all know that he would have done a better job making Texas Chainsaw Massacre as a remake. That's apparently that's his aesthetic. I mean, it would be better than the one that we had a couple years ago. I think it was the year before last, where Leatherface was running around the carnival. That piece of trash where the girl kept on tripping, like repeated, like something was wrong with her legs. she needed to go to a doctor and find out what's wrong with her legs. That movie was such trash and made me apprehensive about watching this Leatherface prequel. I will admit that technically both of these movies are competently made as far as lighting, camera work, special effects, especially the practical effects. I will say as far as the technical aspects of these movies, they were done well. But the story is insulting to the Halloween franchise. Really, honestly, if he had released these 2 movies and called them a totally different title and changed the mask on the killer, I think people would have enjoyed it more. People would have been like, oh, that's an alright slasher movie. But to make these pieces of garbage trash and call them Halloween? Fuck you. I don't even know why John Carpenter let him do this. I guess he was on his Stephen King, if it pays right, you can fuck over my story. Also, just, I don't hate Rob Zombie. I actually enjoyed House of a Thousand Corpses, and I'm probably one of the few people that actually liked Lords of Salem. But, like I always say, just because I love something doesn't mean you won't hate it, and just because I hate something doesn't mean you won't love it. What did you think about Rob Zombie's I don't even want to call him that. What did you think of Rob Zombie's slasher movies? Let me know in the comments.
Michael, for God in heaven, die!
I'm going to mention which other Halloween movies this one references. So if you consider that a spoiler, then I would tell you to go watch this movie and then come back to this video. You have been warned. So let's talk about the atmosphere of actually going to see this movie. I went to go see this movie in Altamont Springs at the AMC Theater with the Dolby surround sound and boom seats, which is really cool. And let me just tell you, the best crowd to see a horror movie with is a crowd with black people in it, because we react. Cool thing about Dolby sound is that it's so loud that even as we react, we're not being louder than the movie, so no one can complain and say, oh, you're talking through the movie. Plus, audience reaction is pretty much what a horror filmmaker wants. Horror films are meant to evoke a reaction from people. So hearing people gasp or say, don't go in there, it's just an added bonus of watching it in the theater, in my opinion. Question, is this really just called Halloween 2018 or is it H40? Because I seen on Twitter H40 was trending. Or maybe that's just what the people are calling it. My crazy behind was sitting there waiting for Mustafa Akkad's name to pop up on the screen. Instead, Malik Akkad's name popped up on the screen. I'm guessing that's his son. And then at the very end of the movie, they did put dedicated to Mustafa Akkad. In case you happened upon this video and you hadn't seen my previous videos, Mustafa Akkad is the producer that produced, I'm pretty sure he did 3 through Resurrection, if I'm not mistaken. His name usually appears before the title card of Halloween, and so that's why I was looking for it. And I'm sure if you're new to my video, you're probably thinking, this woman is such a horror geek. Who looks at producers' names? Me? As we saw in the trailer, a couple of journalists / podcasters show up to the mental institution because they want to talk to Michael. I don't even remember if they ever said why, besides just getting content for their podcast. That seems like a bit much just for a podcast. One of them shows or tries to show Mike his mask. He acts unbothered, and then they go on their merry way. Then the asylum staff say they're preparing to, wait for it, transport Michael. Because that's what they do in these movies. They try to transport Michael and he escapes. This is like, what, the 6th or 7th time they've tried to transport him and he escaped. But we're not supposed to remember that, because this is a direct sequel to part 1, remember? They've only tried to transport him twice and he's only escaped twice. Once Michael gets loose, you know what he has to do. He's got to go and kill a mechanic, because where else is he going to get his jumpsuit from? He has to kill a mechanic and get his jumpsuit. There's a scene where he takes care of some people and then he gets his mask back. You knew that was going to happen. I mean, that's not really a spoiler. They kind of show that in the trailer. Meanwhile, we get reacquainted with Laurie Strode. We see her home and how she spent years preparing for the very day that Michael gets free. Then we meet her daughter, her son-in-law, and her granddaughter. Her daughter is still very resentful of all the tactical training that her mother forced upon her in preparation for the time when Michael gets loose. The son-in-law provides some comedic relief, and it actually worked out pretty well. And it's really no surprise, seeing as this was co-written by Danny McBride. And don't you find it funny that 2 of the best horror movies of this year, was Get Out this year or last year? I think Get Out was last year. My bad. 2 of the best horror movies of the past 2 years have been written by comedic writers. But it kind of makes sense, because the one thing that horror and comedy have in common is timing. You have to have great timing for comedy. You have to have great timing for horror and suspense. Let's talk about the kids. The granddaughter is caught in between her mother's resentment for her grandmother and her own love for her grandmother. We meet the granddaughter's friends, and they're actually pretty likable teens. I liked how they shot them walking together in the same way that Laurie and her friends were walking home. Except they changed one thing. Instead of doing the classic American shot from the knees up, they altered it just slightly and it's more from the hips up. But still, same result, great shot. I like their conversation about how Michael killing a few teens is not a big deal, because these are current day teenagers, and in their world they have to deal with mass shooters and school shooters. These are kids that have to do active shooter drills in their classroom, so just a few people being stabbed is probably lower on their scale of atrocity. One of the kids babysits the cutest little boy named Julian. He is the definition of a precocious child. He really stole the show. The young actor's name is Jibril Nantambu. And I looked up the first name. In Arabic, it's an archangel. I thought that was kind of fitting, because he was the cutest little thing. And again, if you've seen the trailer, you know what happens to her. This movie has some great shots. The point of view is back. Those great wide shots are back. Some of the scenes with the podcasters is shot real up in their faces. You know how I feel about that. I don't want to be so close up in an actor's face that I can count their nose hairs. I don't even like myself sitting this close to the camera, but I'm working with limited space. Anyway, the lighting is great. We get to see the shape in all of his glory. One of the best lit sequences is the part with the mental patients outside of the bus and the father and son that are going hunting. That whole sequence is shot so beautifully. That also had some great suspense and a great aftermath shot. And what I mean by aftermath is sometimes they don't show the kill, but they show the victim after the kill and what has happened to them. And there was a shot like that in this sequence, and it was done very, very well. What I'm gonna do is I might put a couple of shots at the very end of this video, and I'll put a spoiler alert before those for people who have seen the movie, just so you know what I'm talking about. I actually don't mind how they mixed that up, because we saw several kills on screen and then we saw several aftermaths on screen. The practical effects work were very good on these. The mask looks great. If you look at this, the eye holes are cut well. I don't know whether I remember to mention this in H2O, but I felt like the eye holes were cut too big. I know it's a tiny thing to notice, but for me, I felt like the eye holes were cut too big. And this one, the eye holes were cut just right. The eyebrows are not too dark. The hair looks as if it would on a mask that's 40 years old. Nick Castle came back to record his breathing and to advise the new guy who plays Michael. He showed him how to correctly do the head tilt. By the way, that's James Jude Courtney that played the shape in this, and he did an excellent job. Haddonfield is integrated now, and I really loved seeing all the black people that live in town. Incidentally, Halloween has not always been the best with that. Friday the 13th has always had a more diverse group of kids. I mean, Friday the 13th was on that diversity stuff way before it was a cool thing to do. They even had a differently abled person in a wheelchair. So, I mean, when it comes to diversity, Friday the 13th kind of wins that. Nightmare on Elm Street jumped on that around, Kincaid was in part 3, and he was in part 4 with Sheila. And then in part 5, I can't remember the girl's name, but she was played by, Kelly Jo Minter. Don't remember the character's name, but I remember Kelly Jo Minter because Kelly Jo Minter was in Nightmare on Elm Street 5, and she was in The People Under the Stairs, Mask. I feel like there's something else I'm forgetting that she's in. Popcorn. Mask is in a horror movie, but the other 3 were horror movies, so she's a certified scream queen, because as I said before, 3 or more horror movies makes you a scream queen. But like I said, Nightmare on Elm Street, their diversity was just barely there, but they did it. Friday the 13th was the best. Halloween wasn't really diverse until H2O. Yes, not until H2O. So this is the most diverse Halloween we've seen, and it's representative of a lot of places in America right now. It's just what it is, and I love it. That's one of our country's strengths. Don't at me. Remember what I said about no small parts, only small actors in some of my previous Halloween reviews? The award for this movie goes to the brother in the cowboy hat. I could not find a still shot of him, but he was just oozing with charisma as he walked around with his cowboy hat on, smiling and chewing scenery. Like, he was not forgettable, his character, even though he was on screen for what, a minute and a half at most. I also liked the homages to the previous Halloween movies. There was lots of homages to Halloween movies. I'm going to read them off my phone because there's no way I can remember all this. I had to take notes. The police refer to Michael's original rampage as the Babysitter Murders, which was the working title of the original Halloween movie. It was called, the working title was The Babysitter Murders. There's a conversation in a cemetery that features Judith Meyer's gravestone. What do you call it? Is it a tombstone, a headstone, or a gravestone, or all 3? Someone let me know in the comments what you call that. But there was a conversation in the cemetery that reminded me of the one from part 1. There was a clothesline featured. A character, obviously you saw in the trailer, was dressed as a bedsheet ghost. If you blink, you'll miss them, but there's 3 little children that walk by dressed in the silver shamrock masks from Halloween Part 3 Season of the Witch. And I got so happy when I saw that. I don't know why. I got a kick out of it. And the public restroom scene definitely is reminiscent of the public restroom scene in Halloween H2O. That's all I can remember offhand because I was in a movie theater. I couldn't take notes on my phone, so that's what I got from memory. If you notice some other homages that were paid in this movie, please write them down in the comment section below. Write in caps, spoiler warning, and then space like 3 times down and then write it in case someone happens to look, The writing was really tight, and you could tell that the writers, David Gordon Green, Danny McBride, and Jeff Fradley, actually really love and respect the original movie. Unlike Rob Zombie, they know what made the first movie work. There was some criticism about the first half of the movie being slow. I disagree. The first half of the movie is called something, and I'll let you in on a little secret. It's something that a lot of movies used to do, and it's this thing called character development. Speaking of characters, there is a Dr. Loomis type individual. He's like Loomis in that he worked with Michael Myers and he's obsessed with Michael Myers, although his motivations are completely different than Loomis's motivation. David Gordon Green directed this, and he did an awesome job of keeping the feel the same as the original without making it feel like it was too copycatish. The writers and director understand that slasher movies are mystery suspense thrillers with elevated violence. This shows the most with the sequence with Laurie walking through her house. That's the only way I can describe it without spoiling it. The tension of that sequence had my stomach tight. There's also a bit of a role reversal that happens in this movie, and I really got a kick out of that. Another thing that made this movie so good was that John Carpenter came back and did the score. Remember how I just said that in H2O and Resurrection they kind of flubbed on that because they tried to be original and change the score, but the music used in both of those movies just could not top John Carpenter's score. I believe John Carpenter also executive produced this alongside Jason Blum. There was a teenage boy crying outside the theater when we came out, and I don't know whether it's just that the movie was that shocking to him or whether he had some type of sensory issue that maybe was triggered by the Dolby. It's hard to tell sometimes whether a person is emotionally affected or traumatized by the movie or whether he had special needs that made the Dolby experience too much for him to handle. This movie was pretty good. I can't wait to own it on DVD or Blu-ray. By the way, check out this cool crew pic. These should be included on every movie on the IMDb page. Also, please do enjoy this funny picture of Laurie and Michael Myers. And before I go, I'm also going to spoiler alert. So click off this video if you're worried about spoilers. I just have to post these pictures of some really cool practical effects work that was done in this movie, and you can't do that without showing the outcome for certain characters. So check this out. This is just, I love practical effects, so I'm gonna love this. Hey Latchkey kids and driving mutants, I'm Lady Shasha, mistress of the snark, connoisseur of the gore, and your hostess with the mostest, and I just rewatched Halloween Kills. This starts right where Halloween 2018 left off, and it takes place later the same night. Then we get a flashback to the first night in 1978. Is that officer that just got shot the director of The Wolf of Snow Hollow? Then it jumps back forward to 2018. I must admit that I'm a little disappointed that they couldn't get Paul Rudd back to play Tommy Doyle. Anthony Michael Hall is a great actor, but I just didn't buy him as Tommy Doyle. Anyway, he messes up a Halloween talent show to freak everyone out by telling the story of Michael Myers. Meanwhile, Laurie, her daughter, and granddaughter, who have just survived Michael, are headed to the hospital. Now here's the last bit of info that I'm going to give to you before I get into the review. We get treated to a great scene, which if you've seen the trailer, you know what I'm talking about, of Michael taking out the firemen. I didn't hear anyone complain about this the way they complain about Candyman and those policemen. Hate to break it to you, but Michael Myers doesn't give a damn about cops either. Anyway, it's a great scene. It had lots of carnage, and the practical effects looked great. This is definitely the most violent Michael Myers kills have been since probably Halloween 2. Let's talk about the townspeople. I enjoyed the different townspeople that were featured. The elderly couple, the gay couple, the sheriff, who, by the way, made me think of this character from Jason Goes to Hell. It's probably because of that hat. Kyle Richards is back reprising her role as Lindsay, and she did pretty well. There also were these badass kids that made for some pretty entertaining scenes. New drinking game. Take a sip every time someone says evil dies tonight.
Evil dies tonight. Evil dies tonight. Evil dies tonight. All right, evil dies tonight. Done. Evil dies tonight. But now it needs to die. It needs to die. And I'm the one that needs to kill it.
There's some really fun scenes in this. Like when Michael had all those people hemmed up in the car. I love the execution of that. The way he took most of them out was pretty cool. One death was kind of silly, but it was forgivable because it was entertaining. I did kind of feel like the momentum of the movie sort of ground to a halt when it went back to the hospital where Laurie was. And I didn't care for the big hospital set piece they did. I felt that was really hokey. I get where they were going for, but it just didn't work for me. I'd like to get into some spoilers now, so just jump to this time code here to skip that part. Spoiler warning, you have been warned. Dr. Loomis makes an appearance in this. It looks like it was done via practical effects and a little bit of CGI. I loved it. I don't know how they did the voice. Maybe they were able to find a voice actor that sounded just like Donald Pleasance, but it was spot on. I loved when Michael was testing knives and an actual corpse to determine which one he liked the feel of best. It's so Michael. There's some silly elements in this that I couldn't ignore. Like, why did Tommy Doyle keep thinking he could take on Michael Myers with just a baseball bat? I just thought that was silly. And I did peep some callbacks to previous Halloweens. Like, for example, those 3 badass kids I told you about. Did you notice that their masks look somewhat like silver shamrock masks? Like I said earlier about the hospital set piece, I really disliked the Evil Dies Tonight mob hospital scene. I felt like the movie was doing so well before that. It's not that on its own it's a bad scene. And it would have worked really well in any other horror movie except this one. Upon watching this a second time, I really didn't think I was going to enjoy it the same way I did the first, but I actually kind of enjoyed it more because now I know what parts to look forward to. It's not the perfect Halloween movie. It's not the worst, but it's not the best. It's just okay. I enjoyed it for what it was. With that said, I will be back in just a moment to talk to you about Halloween Ends. If I entertained you, made you smile, or helped you pass the time, please consider supporting this channel so that I can do that more. Horror channels often get suppressed and demonetized, but you can help in 3 ways. By pledging a monthly contribution on Patreon, sending a one-time tip using your preferred financial app, or you could help for free by liking and commenting for the algorithm, and most importantly, sharing this video on your social media. Thank you so much. Welcome back. Let's get into Halloween Ends. This opens with babysitter Corey, who has to babysit a badass rich kid named Jeremy. He's supposed to be 21, but he doesn't look a day under 35 years old. If the actor's under 35, dude, moisturize or something. Corey is a quiet, unassuming young man who plans to go to engineering school. But something happens that I won't spoil. This was a great opening for a horror movie, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say that it didn't exactly feel like a Halloween movie. Then we suddenly jump back into Laurie Strode's continuing story with her granddaughter. And am I a bad person for not liking Laurie's daughter nor her granddaughter? I just don't care for them as characters. They're not as bad as the Laurie Strode from the Rob Zombie Halloweens, but they still aren't particularly likable. At the same time, we catch up with babysitter Corey, who now works at a junkyard instead of going to college for engineering. Now, here's where you're either going to agree with me or disagree with me. I had an inkling that this was going to be a good movie as soon as I saw a random hobo. That was a staple of 70s and 80s films, was the random hobo. Also, bonus cool points for having a character read tarot cards and not misinterpreting the death card. Corey is the most accident-prone person, plus he has the worst luck. The actor playing Corey kind of reminds me a little bit of Dick York. a young Dick York. He reminds me of two other people, but I'll get into that when I get into the spoiler section of this video. There are some really fun kills in this. Again, I will talk more in depth about them when I get into the spoiler section. David Gordon Green is the director of this, as he was for the previous two, I believe, and he did a really good job in my opinion. If I'm not mistaken, he's also the director that has been given the keys to remake The Exorcist. I disagree with anyone remaking The Exorcist, but this could be put in worse hands. This movie went in a different direction while keeping some of the core elements of Halloween, much like the Rob Zombie Halloween and Halloween 2 did. Some people aren't going to like that. I personally was not a fan of Rob Zombie's Halloween, but for different reasons. And it's okay not to like a thing. Like when I did my review of the entire Halloween series, check that out if you haven't already. When I talked about Rob Zombie's Halloweens, I did talk about the good things and the bad things about them and why they aren't my particular cup of tea. What I am seeing that's very divisive with this Halloween is people really putting 20 on 10 and crying like, ow, my hurts. And I really want y'all to
stop the blood clot crying.
Anyways, back to the Rob Zombie thing. If you want me to elaborate more on that, definitely check out my reviews of the Rob Zombie Halloweens 1 and 2. This departure from the same old was better in my opinion than even Halloween Kills. It was an enjoyable movie for me, a person who grew up on Halloween, a person who the first musical score I can remember is Halloween. When I first saw the runtime on this, I thought it might be too long, but it didn't feel that way as I watched it. It had some really nice fatalities. They became more and more gruesome as the movie went along, and the practical effects looked great. I had a good time watching this from beginning to end. At the time of this recording, Halloween Ends was available on Peacock. I thought it was a great follow-up to Halloween Kills. What did you think of Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends? Let me know in the comments. Unless you want to stay tuned for another spoiler section. Spoiler alert, you have been warned. First of all, I laughed my ass off when that little badass Jeremy called Corey, what did he say? Ugly ass boy babysitter. I don't know why this director or this writer has a thing for smart mouth little kids, but it's funny. Maybe I have the same type of enjoyment of seeing little kids be smart mouth, but that made me laugh. The band geeks are the bullies now. That's a flip. And I can say band geek because I technically was one. I was a majorette, not the cool, sexy kind from HBCU, the baton twirling kind. We kind of were leaders of the geeks when you think about it, since we marched in front of the band. So anyways, when did they become the bullies? Editing Shasha here. I just wanted to complete my thought about the bullying. When I first saw the movie, I thought it was kind of extreme to have the kids bully Corey outside of the convenience store about him not buying them beer. But then I saw these news clips and it all made sense.
One of the busiest intersections in downtown Toronto, only steps away from where a man was stabbed and died. Now police confirm 8 girls are charged with second-degree murder. 3 of them being 13, 3 of them being 14, and 2 of them being 16 years of age. Police say on Saturday night the same group of girls was involved in a separate altercation and shortly after midnight stabbed a 59-year-old man. He died in hospital.
Tonight, a 16-year-old headed to jail for first-degree murder. Pinellas Park police say on Monday, Jason Olivo Smith gave a man some money to buy beer for him from a convenience store, but that man, John Ash, rode off on his bicycle with Smith's money. Detectives say Smith chased him down and shot him in the back of the head.
Well, it happened at Tony's Market behind me last evening. An employee there who's seen the video of the actual attack, which has not yet been released, estimates these teenage killers could be as young as 14. We do have the aftermath of what happened. It's not pretty. Too gruesome for TV. We have blurred his bloody, battered head. It happened outside Tony's Market Thursday night. The victim, who worked there, tried to stop 4 teens from stealing beer. They apparently beat him with a scooter.
But my point is, they bullied Corey outside the Quickie Mart, and I'm going to call them Gen Z Gang Gang. They were some super interesting characters, but they got messed up at a junkyard, and I enjoyed that. That sequence was so good. My favorite kill is definitely the radio DJ. He got his jaw literally jacked, and then he got his tongue cut off. By the way, did they sound like they were playing a Muzak version of Don't Fear the Reaper in the grocery store when Lori was talking to old dude that used to be a police officer? One thing that they kept on telegraphing was that car grinder thing. I mean, by the second time they showed that car grinder, I was like, I know what they're going to use that for by the end of this movie. They shouldn't have telegraphed that one so heavily. The other 2 people that Corey reminded me of were Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer and Arnie from Christine. He was like a combination of those two people, but only if Michael Myers would be like his Christine. But at the same time, his relationship with his mother was giving Carrie White tease mixed with a little bit of Norman Bates. When Corey's mother smacked him and then kissed him on the lips, I was like, WTF. Honestly, you could tell Corey was going to be a psychopath by all that Yoo-hoo chocolate milk type drink he kept on drinking. That was diabolical. There is one completely unintentionally funny scene that I don't think was meant to be funny, but I laughed my ass off at. When Lori had Michael hemmed up on the center island in the kitchen, she had each of his hands pinned to the chopping block and in one of his legs pinned with the refrigerator, and he was kicking his other leg at her still. Like,
I'll get you, bitch.
This is another movie to add to what I'm calling the Joe Bob Briggs effect. That's when a director has the ability to make a regular theatrical release but chooses to make a drive-in classic instead, specifically for the purpose of being featured on Joe Bob Briggs' The Last Drive-In. James Wan did it with *Malignant*, Zach Krecker did it with *Barbarian*, and now David Gordon Green has done it complete with a cameo by Darcy the Mail Girl. Some people are not going to like that Michael is not the only killer in this movie, and they sort of hinted that this would be a departure from the series by using the same exact font that was used in Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Each slasher series gets a movie like this. Elm Street had Freddy manipulating Jesse to kill for him. Jason Voorhees had someone impersonate him for Part 5 A New Beginning. And he passed his demon worm from person to person in Jason Goes to Hell. So I guess it was Michael's turn. How you feel about those movies may inform how you feel about this one. I enjoy Nightmare on Elm Street 2. It's one of my favorite Nightmare on Elm Street movies. I also enjoy Friday the 13th 5 A New Beginning. Jason Goes to Hell, not so much, except for the gore. It had really great gore in that movie.
It's disgusting. Ugh. I love it.
And it had an iconic stinger that teased Freddy versus Jason that we wouldn't get for another 10 years after that. Anyways, I enjoyed this movie. It may not feel like the most Halloween movie, but it was a good standalone horror movie in my opinion. But like I always say, don't take my word for it. Watch it for yourself. Just because I love something doesn't mean you won't hate it, and just because I hate something doesn't mean you won't love it. At the time of this recording, Halloween Kills was on HBO Max, and Halloween Ends was on Peacock. Have you seen either of these? What do you think about this series? Let me know in the comments. Until next time.